Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome you to our weekly masterclass. This week we're going to be talking about procedural animation. Now procedural animation, for those who are not familiar, is basically the process of animating a character or objects or anything like that entirely using code. Now there is other ways of doing this as well. We'll go into those with components that sort of short circuit the process, but the key about procedural animation is that the procedural animation is dynamic, it's real time, it's not baked into the characters. So for instance, with traditional animation, you may hand animate an object, that is to say move it from place A to B on a timeline, or you use motion capture or something like that. Procedural animation is all about doing that in response to events that happen inside the environment. So what we're going to do today is we're actually going to discuss a couple of ways we can do procedural animation. This masterclass will be a little bit scripting heavy, just because a lot of what we will be doing is interacting with scripts. That said, there are ways of bypassing that, and I'll actually show you a couple of them today. So I'm just going to go into my Unity project. So this one is a region that you can now actually get on our store. I uploaded this from our previous audio reactive masterclass. So that one's actually now on the shop, but I'm just going to blank this project out and start from the beginning. So to get into the basics of character animation, because I think characters are probably the most useful application of this, I'm just going to pull into our project a mail template. We're going to have a look at how this is set up. So traditionally, for this kind of animation, animating characters, we have a skeleton. Now if we go down into the bones of the thing, we can actually start playing around with the skeleton items themselves. So as we twist that, for instance, we could see the character behave like that. Now, with Unity, we have a couple of neat little tricks up our sleeve here. So if we wanted, for instance, to say, we'll grab a cube here. Let's say we wanted to make the avatar touch this cube. So reach out and touch. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller so it's a bit more practical. The way you could do this would be to manually animate the process. In that case, what we would do is we'd grab the right shoulder. I'll set it to global pivot. You might animate that a little bit. We'll grab the right arm. We'll start animating that and so forth. And basically, you just selectively go down the list and get it to sort of reach out. The problem is that, one, that's a complete pain in the ass, and two, that's not really a useful way of programming this. Not only are your animations look a bit odd, because the way you're actually doing those twistings, it's also really complicated to sort of calculate out the necessary positions. Now, every humanoid rig inside Unity has the access to something called inverse kinematics. And inverse kinematics is actually exposed through our scripting system. Now, there's a couple of ways we can short circuit this. We actually don't need to go this full process, so I'm just going to grab him and I'm going to revert him back to the default. Or in this case, grab him back in again. And we can actually use inverse kinematics to move this. Now, inverse kinematics makes this a whole lot easier. We've got a component built into our system that'll actually make it possible to use inverse kinematics on this object fairly easily. I'm just going to go grab the schematic. So I'm actually going to animate her on this one for some reason. So I'm just going to grab the male because I know he's got one, I think. Yes, sorry, the older male. As you can see here, if you haven't already been familiar, we actually are in the process of upgrading all our avatars so that the overall quality of them has been improved. Side by side from a distance, it's not too different. There's a little bit of smoothness on this one, but up close, for instance, around the ears, for example, the new ones are modeled significantly better. There's a lot more geometry attached to each one of these characters. So that's something to look forward to. If you're already using the preview viewers, you should actually already be able to see that, particularly side by side. So this is sort of a quick feature preview of something that's coming up, but I'm going to toss him out of the scene and I'm just going to go back to the old one just because it's got the animator attached to it. Now what we can do is we can add a component, and this one is, I think from memory, it's IK something. Okay, multitask, I think that's the one. I just need to find the component attached to it. IK task, there we go. Alright, so avatar IK task is basically a component that will force the avatar to reach out and touch something using a particular bone. So we could actually set this to the left foot. And for the humor value, I will do just that. We will get quite a bit of humor value out of this particular class. So if I hit play, and I'm just going to grab my camera, just align him so we can actually see this. Now, as usual, this will just take a little bit of time the very first time we hit hit play in a particular day's session. Right, here we go. Okay, you will notice that our character has not moved. And the reason for that is this weight field and also the active field. So we just need to tick that on. We need to drag the weight up. So that's 1. We might even need to take that on. Just a minute. We've already run into a bug. Sorry, guys. What are we seeing here? This is because we don't have an animation controller loaded, so I'm just going to put one in. If I just grab the animation or the player controller, that will do the job. The reason that won't work, I'll just go into it in a second, but now we should be able to. Here we go. So here we are. We have our character. He is enjoying reaching out to that cube with his. We can, however, make ridiculous animations using this process, but what should happen is it'll follow some of the bends and things correctly. Now we can play around with the actual component that's attached here, which is our avatar IK task, and we can say maybe it's going to be the left hand that reaches out, and similar process. Now it's going to try and reach the closest point, and you'll notice it actually reaches a little bit off the character. The actual point it's trying to connect is over here. You'll also notice that the skinning is a little bit warped here. The new avatars do definitely fix a lot of these various skinning issues, but as you can see here, we've now got the ability to actually sort of get the character to interact. It will reach out to the closest point, ignoring rotation. Now we can fix that fairly easily using the rotation goal tick box. We just tick on rotation goal, and now it will try and fit the rotation to it as well. So in this case, if we rotate the cube around, we can do this. Now, the inspiration for this particular lesson today is actually because I was asked how we could get a character to lift up a coffee cup as part of an animation. Now, there's a couple of ways we could do that. One, you could do it through a gesture. And this is probably honestly the easiest way to do it, is to record an animation of a character lifting up a cup of coffee, attach it to a gesture, add the cup of coffee as a prop, and just hit play. However, in the interest of making things both more complicated and more fun, we're actually going to do that process today using a animation script. Now, the thing that we've got a problem with here is just following this component model is this is actually only going to work on NPCs. And the reason it will only work for NPCs is because we're adding a component to the core skeleton of the character. And we don't have the ability to do that on the player's character unless using costume avatar a few other places where you can actually completely override the whole system from start to finish. However, we do have these exact bits and pieces that have gone into this script exposed to our Lua scripting, and that is what we're going to do. First, before we get into that one in a little bit more detail, I'm going to also just cover why the script didn't work the very first time I hit play. And that was because of the animation controller needs to explicitly enable it. So if you're doing this with NPCs or things, when you go into your animation controller, this is the very basic one that's built in. If we go into the layers, you actually need to select the layer and you need to make sure IK is ticked on, which you can see there. So you just need to click IK pass and just make that on. If you don't do that, then the animation won't take into effect any inverse kinematics. So, coffee cup. What we may do is we may assume that this is built into a piece of furniture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to model a very, very broken coffee cup. It's going to be rather ugly, but we don't really care too much about this horrible look of it today. Oops. So maybe 0.1. Shrink this down. Incidentally, if you hold the control key when you're spinning something around, it will actually snap to 15-degree increments, just in case you've ever wondered that. Look. All right, not exactly the world's best, but certainly recognizable at least. I'm just going to put this onto a parent onto a childed object, just because we're going to need to be able to tweak this a bit. What we can do is we can actually use this component we've already got just to tweak some of the positionings and things, because we want to get that right. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play with testing how this looks. We'll see if we can adjust some of the bits and pieces, because we'll need to know some of this information when we actually get into the process of. Well, we don't want the left foot. The left hand. So rotation goal. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start tweaking a few bits and pieces just to try and get this so we can line it up a bit with how this is going to look. We've already got a problem. Just did that to neutralize the animations. Let's just drag that one back in. We have the left hand. Rotation got stick. Okay, right. So we've just got those selected. I'm just going to try and fit this, loosely speaking, with the hand. And I'm doing this by editing the children rather than the parent. There we go, it's close enough. You guys are more than welcome to attach proper animations and things to this process, but just for the basics of this, I'm going to add, just in here, we'll call this the IK Masterclass. As you're aware, changes you make in play mode will not be saved unless you turn it into a prefab while it's in play mode, and then those changes will persist. So I'm going to delete that and bring my coffee cup back out. And now, with a bit of luck, we should be able to just drop them in. And with some luck, we will be able to see it all fitted in. Okay, so now we've got our coffee cup. Now it's fairly basic, but what we might want to do so what we can do is we can now actually animate this guy. And I've realized just how humongously proportioned this coffee cup is. This is one that is for definitely waking you up in the morning. So we might, for instance, get the animation to go from here to there, and then back down again. So, process of doing that, I'm just going to try and snap a couple of these bits and pieces. I'm going to add an animation to this. So I'm assuming this is built into, for instance, a furniture item. You click the table, this animation plays. So I'm going to animate this coffee cup. I'm going to add an animation clip to it in a second. I just want to get the basics of it working first. So like that to begin with, and then we will animate it upwards. So we'll call this coffee cup animation. And I'm going to start recording. Let's set the rotation to 1 and 0, just so we've got the rotation recorded on the timeline. I'm assuming this is going to take, this whole movement is going to take about 2 seconds, so I'm just going to go to end first, which might be sort of up here. Now we do have some animation on the player itself as well, so you want to consider when you're doing this as via scripting that you've got the okay, now this should, theoretically, now we're going to pull this one a little bit out just because I think it'll be a more natural movement. So now we've got, so that's our simple animation, and now because it's IK animated, and this should just run in a loop, if we're lucky, we should animate our coffee cup. Now, I did get those heights a little bit wrong, but we do have the very basics of how to do this. But what we want to be able to do is we want to do this through the character. So if you watched Sharish, the drummer, perform at the Fire Poets Delphi talk a few months ago, we had the drummer's hands actually being animated through this process. And I have the very script we use to do this, which I'm going to pull up here. So this is using just the Zero Brain Studio editor for Lua scripts. It's a pretty straightforward, simple IDE for Lua, but we've actually got autocomplete for it, which is the reason I'm using it right here. So if you want to grab the autocomplete file, if you just search for it, it does exist and does make your life infinitely easier when you're doing stuff like this. So we can actually walk through a little bit of how this script works, and you are more than welcome to copy and paste the script if you like. It's a pretty straightforward one. So the requirements for that particular performance were that we could switch it on and off, and that the character, when they arrived, they would sort of position their hands towards the drum target. So what you can see here is we actually got a control, and when that control was present in the scene, we had the thing activate. And by doing it that way, we could actually get we could turn the thing off and on by just disabling that object using a networked clickable. So really the key part to this one was that we had, and maybe this wasn't, maybe we did do this another way. I think we actually may have used the IK task in this one, so we might need to edit this one. This is not quite going to do the job, but what we will do is we will just cut and paste the shell, just for the sake of it, because there's a few bits and pieces we use there. What do we call this one? Target. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use this with a player character instead. So we'll be able to play the whole animation using them. So on the right. So I'm going to do this just on the local player character, and then we'll actually go with an individual avatar in a second. Okay, we're going to go with, just to begin with this one, space.scene, player avatar.set IK goal. We're going to set the IK goal. Now the string, the IK goal, is actually the same as Unity's own internal ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to Unity, I think it's IK goals, avatar IK goal, and that's the name of the one there. And I think it's just sort of like left foot, right foot, that kind of thing. Yep, so we're just going to grab the left hand, because this character is left-handed. Let's set that to left hand. I'm going to set this to a position goal, so it is a position goal. The position strength will be 1.0. That means it's going to go full strength. Now, something I didn't show there that I might just quickly show is just changing how the strength actually impacts on the IK solving. So the IK solving, if we just go here, we can animate this in and out just to watch it. If we see that strength, we're just going to lower the weight down to 0. So if the weight is 0, you see that it's not actually influenced. If we set it to 0.9, you see there's a little bit of influence. As that approaches 1.0, you'll see that the influence becomes quite dramatic, and then after 1.0, it's completely driven by the IK, and that actually lets you transition in and out of that IK just by controlling the weight. So as you move that 0 to 1, and you can do that through script just by adding this weight field. So I'm just going to set it to 1.0. I'm going to set it to position target. Now this we need to set to the target.world position. And we're going to set this now to this position target. We're going to set it to rotation goal 2. The rotation strength is also 1.0, so you can animate the position and the rotation strength independently. And the rotation target is going to be target.world rotation. Okay, now if I've done this right, sorry, I need to put another end there. Okay. So this is going to be our simple IK animator, and it's looking for an object named target. So I'm just going to rename the coffee cup to target, just so it's there. And I'm going to attach the script to the actual coffee cup, because it doesn't actually need to be attached to anything in particular. I'm going to add a scripting runtime. Paste. We're going to wait for player on this one. And and this should all be otherwise standard. And now I'm going to swap this one out with an actual player using our player preview thing. So I'm just going to drop a player char into the scene. And when I do that, I am also going to need to drop it. This kind of might be interesting. I'm also going to need to add a ground plane just so we don't fall. And I'll just change the color on this one so it's a bit more easy to see the coffee cup. Okay, and now when we hit play this time around, turn off that main camera. Just save the scene. Okay, Masterclass demo. This one unfortunately has executed a little bit too soon, so I'm just going to take that one off. I'm able to find referenced object and get reference. And that's because I set it up as a reference, not as a. Oops. Set that to off by start. We'll fix that up in a second. And that's just because scripts can actually execute before the player arrives in the scene. That's to enable sort of scripts to set up a scene while the loading scene is still up, particularly if you're doing procedural building levels and things. That's quite useful. Okay. Talking about. Should, in theory, be animating. I just want to check this one because we're not. Okay. Character, I'm just going to dig down to the player character and have a look at him. So we are not attaching our IK controllers. Let's just have a look at the script. This is debugging in action. I'm just going to put some logging in here just to make sure it's actually doing something. Now, here we go. So we have just fiddle with the script a little bit, just fixing the issues, and then you guys can cut and paste this one as we go. So our IK target is now being set. So this should be animating the player character. For some reason, we are not. I may need to, just incidentally, you also need to be using a newish editor pack for this to work. So I'm just going to dig down to the character and just make sure that their animator is not being set for some reason. So the target is being set. Just 1 second. Just to make sure I'm not doing something stupid, because I think the script should be working. This is maybe one of our masterclasses where I do run into a bug or two. Hopefully we can get this one quickly solved. So what have I got wrong? It might be that the IK goal is, the name of the goal is wrong. I'm just going to double check that one just to make sure that is correct. I think that should be right, but it would be useful just to just get a little bit more debug information as well. Okay, that is in fact correct, I think. So let me just double check I've got the name of the thing correctly. I'm just actually going to dig into our IK source code simultaneously on another screen, just to double check it. I think this should be set up right though. And I have a feeling this may work actually when it's uploaded, but it's misbehaving inside the editor preview. This was something we recently added support for, so I'm just going to check IK so set IK goal. Position string. Interesting. Okay, 1 second. Does look like I've got that correct. Just want to make sure that this is. Control. Aha! We have a bug in the end of the pack. Okay, so we're going to need to resolve that one. Unfortunately, that's a little bit of a harder one to resolve. We can do it. What do we need to do? We need to. I may need to issue a patch on this one, so I apologize to everyone who wants to test the editor packs. I'll try and get that out as soon as possible. But until then, what we can do is at least play with our existing one, and I'll get that scripting issue fixed. Okay, so we'll go back to this one, because actually what I wanted to get to was a few of the things we could actually do beyond just simple simple targets. And to do that, I'm actually also going to use scripting to talk about things like animating the character, in particular things like procedural dances. I've actually seen some very cool things done here with procedural dances. So I'm actually going to make a bunch of levers, and those levers are going to control the speed of a weird avatar dance. So one of the things to note is that IK, we've got control over principally 6 things. We have control over the left foot, the right foot, the left arm, left hand, right hand, head position, and then we have torso. Now the torso position is actually indirectly targetable, because what we do is we actually don't target this one. We keep targets on all 5 of the other locations, and then we move the torso, and the avatar will sort of spring between them. And giving you a quick example of that one, what I can do is I'm just going to add a few more cubes. We're going to call this one, that's going to be our right hand. I'll just duplicate this a couple of times. Okay, so we got maybe our floor, so I'm just going to okay, so this is the character's perspective, which is how this is oriented. This is our right hand. This is our left hand. Right foot. Now, I'm just going to add 4 IK tasks. This one you can actually compound them, as you can see here. And this is going to be standards for actual scripting. So I'm just going to go right hand, left hand, right foot, left foot. Now I'm going to leave all of that on. So that's from the right hand, left hand, right foot, left foot. And I'm just going to line these up a little bit better. And the reason I'm doing this to show you is principally what we can do with the character when we've got all of the key sort of limbs bound with an IK controller. I'm just going to turn back on our main character, sorry, main camera, because we can't actually see anything. Okay, now I feel like I've messed one up. Which one did I mess up? The right hand. Oops. There we go. Now what we do ideally need to do to get this one to look the same is we may need to orient some of the rotations. So just so the rotations actually match what the character is, because the blue arrow will point forward and it should match how the bones look. Now I think I've got this one the wrong way around, so I'll just need to, oh no, I may have this correct-ish. Now the reason I wanted to show you this was just so we could do this. So as I move the character around, as you can see, it will try and fit. Now this means you can do, for instance, torso movements by keeping those bits constant and then gyrating along here. We can also do dances using these bits. Now what you could do, just as a very simple example, and we'll do this through code in a second, is I'm going to create an empty object. I'm just going to attach all these guys to it, just so I can put this onto a single timeline. It's going to be out. And what I also am going to do is I'm just going to put the hips onto here as well. I just paused. Okay. All right. So we'll save this as IK dance rig. What we can do is we can just start animating some of these bits and pieces. So the left hand, might raise that up to there. Do the same for the left hand, for instance. Now, if you haven't already seen the animation timeline, this is a fantastic thing when actually building props and items and things, that we can actually animate almost anything on these timelines, which is very useful for doing things like doors and everything else that might normally require scripting. So as you can see here, we can sort of do some very basic principle animation here. But what we'll do is we'll start now rigging this up to scripts, because scripts will give us a bit more control over exactly how this is going to go. So I'm going to, oops, grab you, just move it out. And I'm going to add a new script. Okay, all right, I'm going to add some references. I'm going to add all 4 of these. Actually, 5. Right, so we're going to go hips, which is actually going to be our character. So if you're going to edit a player, just edit their avatar object directly through script. We're going to add our left hand. Left hand. Okay. So left hand, right hand. Left foot, right foot. Okay, and now I'm just going to start editing this one. I haven't set up the association for little files yet. Okay, so I'm just going to go to my boilerplate. This is just it's got an update loop already put in place. I'm going to say, oops, hips, space, reference, hips. And that actually just ties up these object references down the side. So hips, left hand. Okay. I'm going to start playing with some math here. Okay, so during our update event, what we're going to do is we're going to animate the rotation to begin with. So we're going to start with the hips. So I'm going to do hips dot, we'll say volt rotation, yeah, equals Quaternion dot Euler. Now I'm going to set this to 0. I'm going to animate the Y, I think, do a twist. So to do the twist, we'll do a math, space math dot ping pong. It's going to go between between certain values. So we're going to say 0. Sorry, we're going to set the t that's going to be set to time, so space dot time, and we'll set this to the interval is 360. If I've done this correctly, I'm just going to times that by 60 to give it a slightly faster speed. We're going to see some really weird animation as we do this. Okay. As you can see here, we are now twisting the core of the character around using scripts. And because I've got that ping pong, it's actually going to go forward and back, forward and back, forward and back. So that gives us sort of basic gyration. Now what we want to do is lower the range of motion and increase the speed. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the range of motion. We're actually going to only oscillate between 40 degrees. So we'll say it's going to 40, and then we're going to minus 20, just so it becomes negative 20 to positive 20. On its rotation, and I'm going to increase the speed. So that was 60, but maybe that will be fine. I'll have a look and see how that goes. So there we go. The rotation is going to run between minus 20 and 20 there. Which if we set to local mode, you can sort of see there. That's sort of how it's bouncing. So now I've got sort of some twist on the hips, and because the feet planted fairly where they should be, it's all kind of solid there. What we might now do is we're going to oscillate. We might use a sine wave to impact the speed on this one. So what I might do is do space math dot sine. No idea how this is going to look. This is going to look kind of wonky, I'm betting, but the wonkier the better. So I don't know exactly what sort of motion that is applying, but you can see there that the twist sort of goes there, and I might speed this one up a bit further as well. So I'm just going to type speed, and we'll speed that up by 4 times. Maybe a little bit too fast, so I'll just lower that one down, but we'll move on to the next one. So we'll do that. We'll do the left hand and right hand. So I'm just going to save the default position of these guys first before we do anything else, before we edit it. So I go default left hand or left hand position. I apologize for mixing cases here. It's going to be left hand world position. And we're just going to do that so we can save it. And I'm going to add hips, left position, world position equals left hand position, whoops, vector. Okay, so we've got vector.new, and it's going to be left hand position.x. Move some stuff out of the way here on my desk. Left hand position.y. Okay, so that'll just fix it in place, but we don't really want to just fix it in place. We want to animate on the Y. So again, we'll do okay, and that's going to start animating the left hand as well. Let's have a look how this guy looks. So maybe not quite what we want. The range of motion is a little bit funky, but we can add to this. So the right hand, I'm going to do the same thing, but slightly different. Okay, and we're going to flip that one around. And now it should sort of seesaw while twisting. We're kind of getting close to a ridiculous procedural dance move. Now the cool thing is about doing this through code is that we can influence this from any possible impact. So we could have it, for instance, we could do it off the audio visualizer, so you can sample that through the audio reactive parts of the scripting API, or we could have it based on proximity to another avatar, so the closer you get, the faster you dance. There's all sorts of bits and pieces we can have here that have a little bit of fun with exactly how this influences the character. I'm going to add a little bit of wobble to the hips here, and we're going to do the same as we've done here. So let's go add hips. Okay. Right, and just copy and paste that one instead. Now, if we did this as this is going to look really funny, so I'm tempted just to run with it, because we're rotating on the wrong axis. Moving on the wrong axis. But this should be kind of funny to watch at least. That's actually kind of amusing. So I might keep at least a little bit of that as we go. I'm going to lower the amount though, so I'm going to set the movement here. I'm going to set it to, we're only going to get 1/5 of that one, maybe a little bit of bobbing, but here's where we actually want want to add some stuff too, so I'm just going to change that. I'm going to add just spaced time. I'm just going to add plus 0.5 to offset that a little bit from here. Maybe not quite what we want, and that's because it's bouncing up a little bit too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hips Y position there, and I'm going to subtract a little bit from it just to make this minus 0.3. So if you're doing scripted dance balls in Sciencespace, you have some potential fun that you can do with making it more interesting than the standard fare. Now we do have a little bit of wonkiness on the shoulder here, and I think that's because of the rotation of this particular cube. I'm just going to try and find the left-hand cube. Oh, sorry, it's the right-hand cube that's the problem. I think it's the conflict between the animations that are actually in the controller. I'm feeling that default ones are a twist. The default character twists a little bit, so actually what I might try and do is I might just swap this animation out just so I get a pure one, because the full animation controller that comes in the viewer is different from the one in the editor pack. The editor pack one is using on animations that we can safely distribute, and unfortunately they're a little bit crap. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to knock all animations off here. So I'm going to put the animation controller, IK simple controller. We're just going to drop this on the character so we can only see the IK animations in place. I'm just going to tick on the IK pass, and that'll make that work. Maybe that didn't work. Let me drop an animation into that thing at least. The controller's missing one, so let's see what have we got. Open idle. We've got a safe idle animation we can use. From various previous masterclasses. I just want one with minimal rotation, as close to just standing upright as we can get. So that's the one you recognise from the wonky. That's the idle, the idle we normally use. I'll just try and find one that's okay. We've got some sort of rotation on it, which is a little bit less than ideal. This guy's the closest we're going to get. So let's drag that one in and use that. What it may be worth doing is just recording a simple T-pose animation. There we go. Yeah, now we've got less wonkiness on that shoulder. Well, we have translated it a little bit onto the other shoulder, but now we get that going up and down simultaneously, and that's because the speeds are the same, so there's never a chance for that to desynchronize. So I'm going to change some of these numbers around. So we've got a 4 there, we've got a 5 there, we'll make that a 6. A 6. And as we desynchronize those numbers, a lot of those sort of synchronous movements are going to sort of break up and it's going to look a bit more organic. Now one of the big problems here is the hands. They are actually sort of reaching for the sky there, and that's obviously because we've got the rotation goal enabled. So this is one of those cases where disabling the rotation goal may make things look a bit more natural. So we need the rotation goal on that one, but where's the left hand? Okay. And if I hide these components, so if I just take the mesh renderer off, you can sort of see our silly procedural dance move here. This is not obviously going to win any awards for animation, but the key is that this can now be influenced based on various other parameters. So what we might do is I'm just going to add a control object to this scene. Might as well use you. just rename, use you, and I'll tag. And we're going to make some very quick alterations in the last couple of minutes that we've got before office hours begins. I'm just using the red mouse. I'm going to add some control sticks to this. So we'll set that to 1. Control. Sorry about that, it looks like we lost connection again, but it should be back now. So I'm just going to do the same thing as before. I'm going to grab these 3 control things. I'm using the y-axis on them to drive the actual values. So I'm going to call this control 1. I've got 3 of them. Control 2, control 3. And I'm going to grab where we've got some magic numbers, like for instance these time values. I'm going to add references to the control objects. I'm going to go control 1.worldPosition.y, and they're all at 1 by default. So that means we can sort of change them by moving them out away from 1. I'm just going to add control 2, control 1, control 3, control 2. Don't have enough on control 1, so we'll put that, sorry, control 3, so let's put that one in there. I'm just going to go to our just going to add a couple more references. So control 1. Let's drag and drop. Okay. And now we should be able to alter exactly how these will work in real time, just by moving those objects around. So the basics here, but if we now can make Avatar move faster and more jittery just by dragging that object up, and you can see the Y value is now 6, so that's running 6 times faster. Or we can slow it all the way down to there, which means that whatever that's controlling is not very influenced. So let's slow it all the way down. So this could, for instance, be a twist slider. Now you could also just do this through the animation controller using the blend system. That's another entirely way of blending various animations together. In fact, for many animations, it's going to look substantially more normal if you do it that way. But the perk of doing it through the inverse kinematic system we've been playing with today is just the fun value. You can make completely broken looking characters that do all sorts of weird things that still manage to do interesting things in ways that just look amusing. It also does have the practical values, though. For instance, the coffee cup we mentioned at the very start of the tutorial for animating interactions with various objects. It's a good way to go in order to make sure the character already reaches out to touch that position on the character and so forth. I'm going to finish up there. So hopefully you've learned, or at least been amused for the last hour. Next week I will have a masterclass returning a little bit more on our vehicle series. There's a few more things that I want to go into detail, so that will hopefully be the topic for next week. I will be starting my office hours in the Welcome Center in 1 minute. Look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you. Goodbye.